Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Implant Practices podcast. I'm your host, Philip Gordon, and this week it is my pleasure to introduce a special guest, Dr. Joshua Austin. He practices a general dentistry practice in San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Austin graduated the University of Texas Health Sciences Dental School in 2006 and is a member of many groups, including the Academy of General Dentistry, the Seattle Study Club, and probably a couple others that I'm not mentioning. What can you tell me about your clubs that you're a part of, Dr. Austin?
Geez, golly, it gets to the point where it's like, it's hard to remember. And then you only remember when it comes time to write a check for dues. It's always a great place to be when you're just writing all these checks. Like the Pierre Fauchard Academy, which is interesting because, I guess Pierre Fauchard is kind of considered as the father of modern dentistry. And I was just listening to a podcast called Sawbones. Have you ever heard of Sawbones?
I have not, but it sounds like something I would enjoy.
Yeah, Sawbones is great. It's actually a husband and wife duo, and the wife is a ER physician, and the husband is a professional comedian. And they will usually explore a topic that's kind of come up recently in the news. So for instance, during the Olympics, they did one on cupping. They did one not long ago on pneumonia, with the Hillary Clinton collapsing thing. And they kind of go through the history of it and sort of what was used to treat it way back, in the Pliny the Elder days and all that kind of stuff. And so after the whole flossing gate thing came out where the AP said, you don't really need to floss anymore, they did one on dental hygiene. And come to find out that Pierre Fauchard recommended to his patients that they brush their teeth with a slurry made of sherry, which is like an after dinner wine. It's just obviously loaded with carbohydrates and sugars. And this is we have this academy that is supposedly supposed to honor dentists, put in the name of this gentleman who recommended that people brush their teeth with alcohol. So
excellent. I usually like to drink my alcohol with sherry and then brush my teeth, which ruins the flavor. But
yeah, so I think that's funny. American College of Dentists, Academy of General Dentistry, of course, all the ADA, Texas Dental Association, all that stuff. I am president of the San Antonio District Dental Society. I think I've got 6 months left, and I'm ready for that commitment to be over and checked off on the checklist.
You'll be happy to have that one, but then happy to have it behind you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're co-host of a podcast of your own called Accidental Geniuses. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I got together with a guy named Mike Detola, which a lot of people may have heard of. He was the clinical director at Glidewell for many years, and now he's the clinical director at Sirona. And he, in addition to being a really good dentist and a great lecturer, he is the funniest guy in all of dentistry. And I really say this, he combats me on this, he disagrees, but I think he could be a professional comedian. If he wanted to, if he put his time to it and whatnot. He killed at Zero World this year, which is it used to be CEREC 30 or whatever. They changed it to a yearly meeting, and now they call it Zero World, and the next year it's going to be called Dentsply Sirona World. But he comes out, he came out and did 30 minutes of basically comedy to start the thing, and just everybody was rolling. He did a 60-minute interview with Richard Branson, which was just amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's not just talking about dental jokes, is he?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, he's very, very funny. And so it's very easy. Our podcast is, we don't have a set format or anything we talk about. We just kind of go with the flow and just sort of see where we go. And sometimes it's super dental heavy and sometimes it's not. And we were trying something new. The first part of this episode will come out next week. So middle October, this episode will come out. So we got a friend of mine who's an OBGYN, and we're trying to, look at each other with a straight face and say that we have it harder as dentists, and there was just no way. We just couldn't do it. She laid it down, and man, you talk about having it tough. They had it tough. And Like you compare the grossest story a dentist could tell does not hold a candle to the grossest story that an OBGYN can tell. So it was a fun episode. We're going to try that with some other medical professionals over the next year or so and try to get a few of them. It's not going to be an every week kind of thing, but every couple months or so, it'll be a kind of a different episode where we talk to another medical professional about what their days are like and whatnot.
Yeah, that's great because we always compare it to other dentists, and then you might talk to a foot doctor or like a ER surgeon, exactly. And they've got a whole nother reference point.
Exactly. It's just as little as like, how many patients do you see on an average day? And she's like, on a normal day, like 75 or 80. And that just like blows my mind. You just can't physically really, maybe an orthodontist could, but a general dentist could not see that many patients in a day. Like, even if you're doing hygiene checks, it would be difficult to do that many. So yeah, it's just interesting how kind of all that comes together. But the physicians talk more than we cut on stuff and they talk, and so it's interesting when you look at the two different models.
Yeah, it is. I know you came to Kansas City last year where we met at the you were doing a lecture for my Seattle Study Club, and I know you're lecturing on marketing through your web platform and your reputation and all that, and we won't make tonight's podcast about that, but I know you've got a big lecture coming up for the Seattle Study Club Symposium.
Yeah, I'm already nervous about it. It's like months away, and it's like I think about it every day. Like, oh my God! And in fact, I'm going to I'm going to spend a couple of days with Paul Homily, who is a dentist. I don't know if you've ever talked to Paul or heard of Paul.
I do. Yeah, I've actually got Paul lined up for a podcast here in the next month, and then. Yeah. So we're going to talk about treatment planning, and when he was in clinical dentistry, he used to place a lot of implants too. Yeah.
He was a big implant guy, and he has a couple different topics he talks about. He talks about sort of treatment plan presentation sort of stuff and the psychology of that. He also has a whole nother part of his repertoire is he lectures, or he teaches dentists how to be better lecturers and how to better, be in front of a group and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going up to Scottsdale and doing a couple of days with him on that. And,
is that in December by chance?
It is in December. Yeah.
Yeah. I know he's got one coming up. He invited me to come out for that one, and I'm not sure if I can make that. I'm building a new practice right now, so my time is dedicated to the construction with that build out, but I may still try to squeeze that in.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of the week, which is hard. It's like Tuesday, Wednesday or something like that, which, is just difficult. It seems like it's more, I don't know. There's just something about missing like a Tuesday and a Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, I've got the bills keep coming, so I got to keep paying those bills.
Keep coming. That's right.
I practice 5 days a week right now, so I got to keep pushing the handpiece.
It's that you have to absolutely make some tooth dust or bone dust.
Yeah, or bone dust. Yeah.
That's right.
And to get beyond that, I've got Dr. Cohen lined up too at the end of the month too, to kind of talk about some of the Seattle Study Club adventures. So hopefully that'll be good.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a big get. He's an interesting guy.
So I know you run a general dental office, not specifically focused on implants. Why don't you tell me about how you got started in implants? And I know you said you have at least placed one implant and then restore implants. So you're as good an expert as anybody, in my opinion. So tell me how you got interested in implants, and then how you've continued to progress in your practice in implantology.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think we're around the same age. Yeah, you graduated around the same time I did.
Sure. I graduated dental school in 2009. Okay. And I'll be 35 this December.
Okay. So, I mean, for me, it was, you talk to somebody who graduated in 1981 or whatever, and they had to get everything they know about implants out of CE because it wasn't, in common practice when they were in school, and it wasn't a part of what they taught. We had a big, implant dentistry part of dental school. I think I restored 8 or 9 implants in dental school. And a lot of that was just luck. I lucked into a patient that had like 4 implants, like ready to roll my junior year of dental school, like just handed off to me, and I restored those. And then, a couple of patients of overdentures and whatnot. And so it was just kind of a part of dentistry. It wasn't like, it was just like general dentists do this just like they do operative, so it's like, this is just something you need to do. And fortunately, my school gave me good education in it. They also had a preceptorship that I did pretty soon after graduation. That was a really good it was a really good foundation on implant knowledge. And so, it just kind of was always just part of it. It wasn't anything that I kind of stumbled into or anything like that. It was just sort of given at the time that I graduated, or from the school I graduated, that you're going to learn this. This was going to be a service. This was a standard of care level service that you're going to offer your patients. And like you said, I don't place. I've placed one in my life.
Now, tell me about that. I'm always interested to hear about people's first implant and either why they stop there or why they continue. Because I find that people either place about 10 or under, or just continue. And it's always a different story why. It's never just one thing.
So it was, at the time, there was a guy in San Antonio who's doing some sort of itinerant kind of wandering perio. He had graduated perio residency. His wife was finishing her some sort of medical residency. I can't remember which one, but there was going to be a year difference where he finished a year ahead of her. And so he wasn't going to start a practice. He wasn't going to go into a perio practice and build it up and then leave after a year. So he just kind of decided, hey, I'm going to go around to general dentist's office and do perio, whether that be traditional osseous surgeries, implants, crown lengthenings, whatever it may be. So he came into the practice to do, I was going to do endo on a premolar, and then he was going to crown lengthen it, and then I was going to prep it. And the endo, just it was one of those where it was 4 canal premolars, super crazy. And it was just, you could just tell hey, everything's super tight. This is probably going to perf. This is just and the decay was much deeper than we thought it was going to be. And it just ended up kind of being it became pretty obvious, hey, this tooth really doesn't need to be crown lengthened in endo. This tooth needs to come out and have an implant in. But the patient was sedated and had only consented to the endo, build up, crown lengthening, and crown. And I knew the patient, he had to be sedated for that. He was not going to come back. And I knew that it was a family that had been in my practice for many years. I knew the wife, and the wife was saying listen, I consent. If you don't do it now, he's not going to come back. This is a one-shot deal. And the particular periodontist, his father was a medical malpractice lawyer. And so he had just this very black and white, no consent, not doing it. And I was like, you walk me through it. Will you walk me through it? And he was like, yeah, I'll do that. And so, he basically guided my hand and walked me through it. I placed it, and it's still there today. And had it been another patient, had it been somebody that I didn't know well, and a family I didn't know well, and the wife had been my patient for years, and we had been both working on him to try to get him to get this done. Had it not been a situation like that, I would have said, absolutely, let's let him wake up. We'll get consent for next time and all that kind of stuff. But I knew that this was our one chance to get this guy fixed. So, it's still there, still in the mouth, still going as a Straumann RC, at number 4, I believe. It turned out nice, and grafted a little bit around it and the whole deal, but turned out good.
Well, that's interesting that your first one was a immediate extraction and placement. So I like that, because it's take it to the next step,
Well, yeah, and in a fairly tough site too. 4 is probably not the most ideal. 4 or 5 would not be the most ideal site for an immediate a lot of times. But it turned out and it worked out okay. And part of the reason that I don't place all that much, honestly, or have ever gotten into placement is because there's 11 world-class periodontists within 7 miles of my office. So there's just so many good surgeons that I don't know. I just always feel no matter what, even guided, I just feel my time would be better spent prepping crowns and doing restorative work, and then getting to do the restoration of the implant after it's placed, than it is, trying to sweat through getting the tooth out.
Oh yeah.
Grafting it, all that kind of stuff.
Now to go back on that, do you do any, like you were saying there at the end, extractions or grafting or site preparation, or because you don't place the implants, you just say to heck with it, I'm not doing any of that stuff either?
No, I will. And I'll, if I'm taking a tooth out and I'm looking at it and it looks to me like it needs some bone or whatever, I'll throw some in there. Ideally speaking, my thought is always, hey, if someone's going to put an implant in there, I would love for them to take the tooth out just so they can see the area before they're going to, drop an implant into it. It doesn't, but you and I both know it doesn't always work that way. There's people who have emergencies and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes the wait to get into a specialist is long. And so sometimes, I think you got to be able to do some basic stuff. Now, am I going to like break off a buccal plate on number 8 and try to graft it like with some titanium mesh or something like that? No, I'm not going to do that stuff, but the pretty simple stuff, I will do in the office.
Sure. Yeah. And so part of that's just, being an experienced clinician and knowing what you do and don't want to get into, and knowing
know the limits.
Yeah. Know what you can say, we're going to do some antibiotics and get you over to my buddy, or say, you know what, we can wiggle this out and then get you over to, doctor specialist so-and-so here in a month or so. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. It's, everybody's got their own story, and everybody kind of goes in a direction that they want. And it's always interesting to see, why that is. So I know you're really big into technology and technological workflow and all that. Why don't you tell me what you're doing with some of the highest technology in your dental office, and maybe how that relates to implants, or maybe how it doesn't?
Yeah. So from a restorative standpoint, early on and when I was in dental school, it seemed like almost the systems, whether it was Straumann or Nobel or whoever, they were all kind of trying to spoof Lego, is what it seemed like with all the snappy caps and all that kind of stuff, like everything, they're trying to make everything as simple as possible, which I admire. And, when I graduated dental school, almost everything was a prefab abutment. We cemented everything because we just didn't know, that all the problems that leads to, down the road for the health of the implant. And so, I always found it to be somewhat, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out the right word, but I always felt like implant companies were always trying to make things seem simpler than they really should be, because it's, we're replacing like a part of the human body. Like, I can't imagine like somebody making prosthetic legs like trying to take the easiest way out possible, and so a couple of years ago, I got into digital scanning of my indirect restorations, crowns, inlays, onlays, bridges, that kind of stuff. And so they added some workflows for implants on my scanner. And so I looked into it and did a couple cases with the Straumann Cares workflow, and had really bad results. Just the lab stuff didn't turn out right. It just went really poor. And so I was still doing the same thing where you kind of closed tray impression. I restore mainly Straumann's, but some Nobels, screw on the impression post, pop on the little purple or yellow, piece of plastic on the end of it, take the polyvinyl impression, unscrew it, pop it in like a piece of Lego. And, it just always seemed, kind of oversimplified, but in a bad way. And so I was lamenting that to my laboratory one day, and he said, well, we can do, implant crowns for you without, the Straumann Cares workflow. And I was like, really? Tell me more. So basically what I'm doing now is I have the 3M True Definition scanner, which works really, really well. It works great for me. Yes, you do have to use powder still, but that's not a big deal. It's fast. It's the least expensive scanner on the market. And so I get, scan bodies from Glidewell Direct, Glidewell the dental lab. They make scan bodies for pretty much any implant system there is. You screw it on, take off the healing abutment or whatever it is that's on there, screw on the scan body, take a radiograph to make sure it's seated all the way, and scan it just like you would a crown prep or whatever, and send it to the lab. And, for posterior ones, it's a slam dunk for a screw retained, zirconia, full contour zirconia screw retained restoration, whether that be single unit crown or even I've done up to a 4-unit bridge. And it makes it so simple, that you're not dealing with making sure you popped everything down into the impression the right way. You're not dealing with the soft tissue model or anything like that. Everything's digital. The lab turnaround time is much faster, and they just screw right in. They just screw right in. And so I've had really good results with that. Anteriors are going to be a little different, because the soft tissue is important, or much more important on anteriors. So there is some ways to scan anteriors, but it takes a couple of different scan bodies, and so that drives up overhead and whatnot. So, if I'm doing like just a single 8 or 10 or whatever, a single anterior, generally speaking, I'll do a PVS impression of that. But anything other than that, I'm scanning, and it just makes life a whole lot easier, and not having to get locked into a certain workflow by using the Glidewell Direct scan bodies is really, really nice. So that's kind of what I'm doing to restore pretty much everything screw retained, just because, cement is such a huge problem. If you don't know, go listen to a guy named Chandhar Wadhwani. I'm sure you guys have had him at your study club. Yeah,
we have. And that lecture he gave was mind blowing, and really changed my view on cement processes.
It really does. It makes you panic, and it makes you think of all the cases that you did and just like, oh God, what have I done?
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the office and call like 3 people and be like,
absolutely.
Would you come into the office? I want to recheck one thing.
And that's a universal thing. You go to that lecture and it just changes the way that you look at the world. And so, our screw retained restorations, a little bit bigger of a pain in the butt in some ways. Like, you gotta patch them with composite, and you can't just use any kind of composite, because you'll be able to tell the difference. You can tell the difference between like the opacity of the zirconia versus the opacity of if you use a bulk fill composite or something like that, that's super translucent. Like, you are absolutely going to be able to see it. It's not going to look great. So it takes some time and it takes some care, and there's an extra step involved. But if that extra 5 minutes of me putting a composite in the occlusal surface means that the implant's going to last, through the patient's life, I think that's 5 minutes I'll gladly spend.
And the retrievability factor and the
stability. Absolutely. There's just, I've never heard anybody say, oh man, like, I'm so sorry that I screw retain that. Like, no, it's always like, thank God I screw retain that, because then I could get it, and I wish I could screw retain everything, but sometimes you just can't. And some of the implant companies are coming up with novel systems that make it easier to kind of have sort of an angled screw chamber and all that sort of stuff. But, it's still tougher in the anterior to be able to get a screw to take a turn, when you would normally have a screw channel coming out the incisal edge, and that's a no-go. You can't have that, or coming out the facial. So, but screw retained on everything, I think, or as much as you possibly can do, is the way to go. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that.
Yeah, no, with all the things changing with the, surgical guides, so implants are being put in at a better angle, the channel being moved with I know Nobel's doing that. I'm not sure if others are. And then just the research showing that, cement's the killer. But when they have to be cemented, what are you doing there? Because when I have to cement, I'm telling my labs, I have to use custom abutments. It has to be, my margins have to be, right at the gum line. So everything anterior has got to be zirconia, because I'm not going to put that margin, 8 millimeters sub G like they would have done 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm not doing anything with a stock abutment anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't work. So if it's cementing, for sure it's a custom abutment. Like you said, in the anterior, using a zirconia. I put in 2 Atlantis today, which is not a common thing for me just because of the price. But God, they're so nice. And it's like, all right, if they weren't so expensive, it would be great. But most labs can do, a very nice job on a zirconia abutment. And if you're going to get a failure, it's going to be between the cement, between, the tie base and the actual zirconia part of the abutment. And you unscrew it, you can either cement it back on yourself or send it to the lab and they'll cement it, and life is good again. And so, that tends to be the failure point of those. But when it comes to cementing, I've got 2 different cements that I will use when I have to cement. One is it's not sexy. It's not going to turn anyone on. It's not going to make you go running, for the Shine catalog to order it. One of them is just Flex zinc phosphate cement. It's a Flex, FLECKS, just the traditional old school zinc phosphate. And assistants don't know how to mix it anymore, because everything they mix is in an auto mix gun. So there's actually technique to mixing zinc phosphate. You got to cut it up like it's Narcos or something like that. It's a technique sensitive.
You have to get out the mirror and start chopping lines, don't you?
Absolutely, you really do. You have to have the glass slab, and you got to break it up into different portions, and you divide it in half, and then you divide 1/2 into half, and then you divide that 1/2 of 1/2 into a half, and it's you end up kind of cutting it like lines of coke.
Not that I know what that is, but I've seen movies. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen enough Narcos on Netflix to know how that goes down. So that's a great option. It cleans up well. It shows up on a radiograph, and short of it being a pain in the butt to mix, it holds very, very well. The other cement that I will use is called Ceramir, which is It's a glass ionomer cement that has alumina, calcium and alumina in it to help in tooth-borne situations. It helps generate hydroxyapatite. It's not going to do that, obviously, in a titanium or zirconia situation, with an abutment. But it's opaque white. It shows up on an X-ray. It's radio opaque. It's easy to clean up, and it holds really, really well. So I use that cement a lot restoratively anyway, and so it's easy for me to use that. When I need to cement a crown on an abutment. But you just got to make sure you get it all, making sure you not overload it. And that's another thing that Wadhwani shows is it's super easy to way overfill those crowns, and even if you're trying to be judicious, you still have too much. And so, you got to go in and make sure you get it out. And sometimes that means you got to take a radiograph to make sure, and you got to dig underneath and whatnot. It's the cost of doing business, man. You got to get all that stuff cleaned out.
Yeah, I always, anymore, I always use so little and clean it out beforehand and then see it. I always wonder, did I even put enough in?
I worry about the same thing
but
too.
I've never had one pop off.
That's the thing. I never have. And I tell them like, hey, listen, I had to cement this in and the key to cement is not having too much. And so if this comes off, by all means, let me know. And I don't get phone calls. It doesn't take a lot to hold those in. And there's tons of case reports of people using like temp bond or something like that, and they're not coming out. So, it's not so much cement as I think it is just making sure you're not using too much and cleaning up what does extrude and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and to go back to what we were talking about before, especially with a custom abutment and a custom made crown, you're not having a compromised crown fit anyway. So the cement really shouldn't be the deal breaker.
Right. All that stuff is all kind of digitally designed together. And that's a cool idea with this digital technology, because theoretically, let's say you were placing, you have a CBC, you have your CBCT data, you can marry that with, your intraoral scan preoperatively, import that into, Implant Concierge is a company who will do this for you, or you can buy the software and do it yourself into Simplant or one of those implant planning softwares, simulate the surgery on the CBCT, have do a digital wax up with the same software, have create an STL file for a surgical guide, and basically have the crown, design your crown right then and there and have your crown and abutment already done. All that can be done digitally in a digital workflow, provided you have CBCT data and an intraoral scan. And you could basically have everything done before you even take it, anesthetize the patient. You have a crown and all that ready to roll, crown, abutment, and surgical guide, ready to roll. And, so the digital workflow on implants, I think, is probably the most exciting thing to come around, I don't know, since Brandemark came around, just the idea of having all that digital data, that sort of, that kind of stuff doesn't translate to crown and bridge the same way. It doesn't translate to operative the same way, or removable or anything else. Like that digital data really only revolutionizes implant dentistry. And it's such a cool world to think about, and there will be a time when we all have all of those, that's just stuff you'd have in your office the same way you have an computer in your operatory. We will all have that stuff. And it's going to make things a lot easier for us to get really good results because of all that data.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the big independent companies that are the scanners and the millers or the CBCTs and the scanners all start to talk and figure this workflow out, because they're understanding the importance of putting all this together. And so it's kind of a race to the finish right now, and companies are merging together to partner with this.
It's an absolute mess right now. It really is, because, you really have to have some computer savvy to sort of work through all this together. That's why I think like Implant Concierge is actually a company here in San Antonio, and they are a great service. And yeah, you pay for it a little bit, but, to have somebody help you through that kind of digital computer stuff is really nice. After doing a few of them with them, you may have the wherewithal to be able to do it on your own. But then again, then you have to buy licenses to these softwares that are not inexpensive and whatnot. But, Sirona right now, Sirona is a fully locked down system. So to do this with Sirona, it actually works really well, but they lock everything down, meaning you have to have like a Galileos or an Orthoffice CBCT, and you have to have like a CEREC Omnicam to do your intraoral part. And if you have those two, then you can, do a lot of this stuff through their software. Now, an Omnicam is going to set you back. Well, just the Omnicam, if you just wanted to have the Omnicam, is going to be $55,000 or somewhere in there. A Galileos is going to be 120 or so. You can get an Orthoffice for 70, which is like a limited volume one. So it's they're high end stuff. They're like the Apple. You pay more. It's a lockdown system, and they control your user experience. And that may be good for a lot of people. I'm kind of more of a tinkerer, and so I like to have access to my data. That's one thing I like about the TrueDef is I can export an STL file of any scan that I do and use that in any other software I want to use and all that kind of stuff. But not everybody wants to do that. Not everyone likes to mess around with that stuff. And so if that's you, if you just want to have stuff that works and not have to deal with it, then Sirona is probably a really good option for you. I think you just have to know your personality type. Yeah, no, I agree. I like how Sirona's trying to put it all together, but I don't like the unflexibility that they have with working between different components. Absolutely. Yeah, you're locked in. Once if you have a CEREC, and you're looking at buying a CBCT, it's hard for you. You don't want to do anything but the Galileos. You have to buy a Galileos, or you could get an Orthoffice if you want a limited volume, a little bit less expensive one, but you're really locked into that. It takes a Herculean effort, and it can be done, but there are a bunch of software steps in between that have to happen. Whereas if you have the Sirona CBCT, it just makes things so seamless. So I get it. It's I don't want to say it's a trick to get you into that ecosystem, but it just is what it is. It's the same thing with Apple. Like I see really cool Android phones come out, and I'm like, oh, that'd be cool to have that phone and that feature or whatever. And then I think to myself, like, how much media I've bought over the years, how many songs I bought on iTunes, how many movies I bought on iTunes. And I just think like, oh God, I can never switch because I'm locked in. I would not have access to those media files if I switched to Android. And so it's the same kind of thing. And I think people don't like that. People don't like that with their cell phones, and people really don't like it in their dental office. But I think you just, if you're already in that ecosystem with some Sirona stuff, I think you got to continue with it. And if you're looking to kind of buy the whole boat, God bless you. I wish I had that kind of jack to pop down $250 for a CEREC and a Galileos. But you can do some really cool stuff with it. You really can. Sure. Yeah, I wish I could go out and buy 2 new toys like that right now, but it's not in the budget. But will there ever be a day that you can do that? I don't know. God, I mean, that's just so much to think about capital investment wise. And if you're in a group practice, it makes a ton of sense. If you're in a group practice, having a CEREC and having a CBCT, you can have it going, multiple times a day because you have multiple providers and whatnot. But for single doc offices like you and me, I think the economies of scale are not in our favor on that stuff. And so thank goodness there are services like Image Dent and Implant Concierge and whatnot that can help and allow us to offer the same level of care without having to buy $250,000 of equipment. But the future, I think, is very bright when it comes to this stuff. And I really do think there will be a day when you have a surgical guide and the implant, the surgical guide, the abutment, and the crown all ready to roll. And it's all in a little box, and you just open it up and, do a tissue punch and put in your implant and, put on your custom abutment and put on your crown, and you're done. That day is coming, and it's actually really here for a lot of people, but that day of that being sort of standard practice is not far. Yeah, it's here for some that have the toys and the money and the foresight and the things that practice outside the realm of what I call real world dentistry still. But the common dental practice can't do that yet. But I agree. I think we're on the horizon of the golden age of dental implants, and these companies are really starting to get it together because even 5 or 7 years ago, half these implant companies didn't exist, like the Implant Concierge, and trying to figure out abutments and placements and all that was so complicated. It is getting better, but the next 5 years, it is kind of like the Apple phone. The first one that came out, it was game changing, but we look at the Apple phone now, and it's like, what a piece of junk that is when you got the iPhone 7. Sure.
So
it was the coolest thing of all time. And so, yeah, I think we're going to experience stuff like that in the next 5 or 10 years that I think that's going to change the way we do it. And, so there's going to be companies that come along and some that go away. And I think at the end of the day, if you're doing stuff the right way, there's plenty of implants that are walking around of companies that, have probably come and gone already. And, those implants are doing fine. I think at the end of the day, the fundamentals of a good solid restoration, solid occlusion, good surgical placement and technique, all that stuff sort of overrides the company. It's what I have found is all this stuff, none of it is product dependent. It's all practitioner dependent. It's all sort of the skills at which you use to place this stuff is much more important than what brand of implant you use or whatever. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's why, the focus of the show isn't calling people and say, well, what kind of implant are you using? Tell me what kind of glue you're using to put them in. I mean, it's more so exactly what you said. And I think I've put that down somewhere at some point. Is, the implant companies may come and go. So may the little gadgets that come with it. But the principles of dentistry and occlusion and cementation and aesthetics and all that, I mean, that, is, if you're practicing correctly, 10 years from now, they may be calling it something different. You may use it in a different machine, but the foundation of dentistry is still going to be the same. So.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think I think the mirror to this is sort of CAD/CAM dentistry. The in-office milled restorations, all that kind of stuff. Like, the at the end of the day, like the important stuff about all that is preparation, isolation, tissue control, tissue management. Getting a good impression, whether that be with polyvinyl or with a scanner, like all those fundamentals still apply, and they're probably even more important in a digital age because there's no fudge factor there. It reminds me of when we would do crown and bridge with traditional gypsum models and whatnot, you would paint the die spacer on the die and all that stuff beforehand. And all that stuff was just fudge factor, right? Like we want the crown to fit. We know that the model is not a perfect representation of the mouth. So we take this nail polish and put it around the die to give us a little extra wiggle room. And we used to say it was for cement. But really it was that the crown would fit. And, now we don't, with digital technology, all that, it's just so accurate now that all that stuff, we don't need anymore. And so it makes it even more important to follow the fundamentals and not cut steps and not cut corners and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, our need for accuracy is increasing more and more and more. So like you said, the margin for error is decreasing exponentially. And so that's where you want technology to work for you and not against you. And if you're doing things sloppy, it doesn't matter if you're using putty or, scanners, you're going to get sloppy result either way. So.
And I scan for at least definitely for my crown and bridge, I scan 99% of the units that I do get scanned. For implants, it's a little bit less because, I still do some anteriors. I still have to take polyvinyl impressions with, but anytime you're doing like a fixed bridge, like a cross arch bridge or something, or like an all on four kind of deal, there's tons of data that shows that the scanners aren't there yet. And there's not the accuracy yet in the scanners for that type of system. And mainly because the scanner does much better when it's sort of scanning teeth as opposed to tissue. And so, you still got to have good impression skills because there are going to be times you need to get an impression. So it's not like you can just throw away your PVS. It's like all those fundamental things of dentistry still apply, in a digital world or an analog world. And it's just, the process may be a little different, but the fundamentals all still apply the same way.
Yeah, you've got to have a lot of tricks in your bag, I think, which sometimes you just learn through experience and seeing things, fail or seeing other people's failures,
Absolutely. You got to screw up to learn stuff, and that's, some of the stuff, some of the lessons that I've learned over the years that are most ingrained are things that I've screwed up, and I actually, so back when Detola, who I do my podcast with, was at Glidewell, he used to do they used to have like this YouTube show that would come out every Wednesday called Chairside Live. And so I had done a digital scan for a 3-unit implant bridge. And at the time, this was several years ago, at the time they couldn't do it screw retained. So the choices were either I had to bring the patient back to impress with polyvinyl, or they could do a cement retained bridge. So I said, do it cement retained. And I had this little idea in the back of my head. And so the patient came in and I basically accessed through the bridge, basically drilled holes through the bridge, just like you're doing endo access through it, uncovered the screw hole, area, kind of smoothed everything out, polished it up. And then I cemented it outside of the mouth. And then basically turned it into a screw retained restoration, right? Cemented it to the abutments outside the mouth and then took it to the mouth to put in, and then to screw it in and close the access holes. That was a great plan and I thought it was super savvy and super cool until I got to the mouth and it wouldn't go all the way down. There's anti-rotation features in the implant or in the abutment that wouldn't, just the little corners weren't lined up just right. And so it wouldn't seat all the way. So I had to send it back to the lab and told them like, listen, we can either remake it or if you have a bright idea. And so basically they just had to go through it with the lab tech just went through and removed those kind of anti-rotation features on the abutment and sent it back and it slid right down. But Mike did a whole feature on that, on Chairside Live, which you can still find on YouTube. If you go look at Glidewell and Chairside Live, you'll find, sort of the implant bridge fiasco. And that was it. And so, now I know that and understand it and have used that sort of technique on other times. But had I not done it and embarrassed myself in front of my best friend who works at the lab, I would have never learned that. And so you got to screw stuff up to learn it. The problem is with implants is that sometimes you screw something up and it costs you $1,000 in lab fees or parts or something like that. So you learn real quick when that happens.
Yeah, you want to definitely try to watch as many other people's mistakes as possible. And your failures are only failures if you don't learn from them, but some of them are harder to swallow than others, So, we've had a good chat here. I know it's a work night, and we both have had full days of dentistry. So I'll ask you one more question here, and this one's pretty vague. Most people don't know how to answer it, so I think you'll like it. If I was going to say, what are your 3 best practices in dentistry, what comes to the top of your mind?
My 3 best practices. Number 1 is I just try not to sell anything. I kind of play it as like a referee. Like, listen, I call it like I see it. Like a referee says, hey, you were out of bounds. The player was out of bounds. Or the ball was foul or fair, whatever. They just call it like they see it. And so I say, I try not to sort of do the whole deal about like selling a patient something, because nothing's worse than if you quote unquote sell somebody dentistry and then something, God forbid, something goes wrong with it. Like you're kind of up a creek to begin with because the patient never wanted it. And so, I think trying to help patients understand how we can benefit them and lead them to the right choice for them. And that choice isn't always going to be an implant. For some people, it's going to be a bridge. For some people, it's going to be an RPD or a denture without implants or whatever it may be. But I just say, just call it like you see it. Try not to go into it like I'm going to sell this person implants when they really don't want them. Because those are the cases that something's going to go wrong on, So that would be number 1, especially, that kind of transcends anything. And to me, that just goes into, just sort of how you deal with patients and how you talk to people. Number 2, I say empower your staff. Our staff can do a whole lot of things. And I think oftentimes we discount or we short kind of what they can do. And we've all had plenty of situations where we talk to a patient about something and it's just not clicking for them. They're not picking up on, for instance, like taking out a compromised tooth and placing an implant or whatever. And then I leave the room and have to go do a hygiene exam or something like that. And then they start asking the assistant questions. And within 3 minutes, the assistant has made them understand in plain terms, what the need is or what's going on. And then they're ready to proceed or ready to talk more about it or move on. And so it just seems like, staff, oftentimes patients perceive them as much more impartial than you. And I don't want to say trust them more, but we'll look at them as more of their advocate or their ally in some situations. And so, utilizing your staff to chat with patients, especially when you're not in the room doing something, when you're out of the room doing something else, use your staff, use your assistants to talk to them. Now that means you got to sit down and educate your staff about a lot of these things, but I think they can be a huge patient motivator, and I think they can really help patients understand and get buy-in. So, I try to do that whenever possible, is have my staff talk to patients a lot, because I think it helps them form relationships with the practice and know that it's not just me and all that stuff. And then the third thing I think I would say is be a part, find a part of a group, a local group that you can share ideas with and treatment plan with and do CE with and grow with. For me, it's a Seattle Study Club. For you, it's a Seattle Study Club. Where people are listening, they may not have a local chapter of a Seattle Study Club, or it may be a closed off group or something like that. It doesn't have to be a Seattle Study Club, but just find a group of people. There's plenty of different outlets now, whether that be, a Spear Study Club or an ITI or a Pankey thing or a Dawson thing or whatever it may be. Just find a group of people to hang out with once a month or once every other month, where you can treatment plan, where you can bounce ideas off of, where you can do CE together, all that kind of stuff. I just think it enriches everybody. When you're in a room like that, I think, none of us is as smart as all of us. You put everybody together, and I think there's much more sort of ingrained knowledge in a big group like that. And it just has been a huge part of my career, is being a part. For me, it was a Seattle Study Club, like I said. So, I just think it's great. And I just think, you can't just be in your little hole all day, your little office all day, not interacting with anybody else and expect to get better, expect to continue to learn and stay up. I think you gotta get out there. And, I don't look at anybody in my city as competition. There's plenty of teeth to go around. And so the friendlier I can be with everybody, kind of the better. But there's my group of Seattle Study Club guys, and we've been doing this for 10 years, and, it's great. I don't know any other way to put it. It's just great. It's become lifelong friendships at this point. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I've only been part of Arch about 4 years, but, I wouldn't go back on it now. It's just, like I said, being part of something that's bigger than you, and you, see how other people do stuff, and, get understanding of things that outside of your realm of knowledge. And so it's really opened up me, professionally, but there's a lot of personal friendships and experiences that come out of that too. It's just as much as a social thing as it is a
absolutely
learning thing, and you need that with people that know what you're going through.
Absolutely. And that sometimes the times, in between the like study breaks, during the C courses or whatever, and you sit and like, hey, I just had this patient last week, whatever. And, you're talking with either a specialist or another general dentist. Like sometimes those are the times that I get like the wisest pearls. And so your group is great. Rich Oakley and Sharon Oakley are just phenomenal, fabulous people. And so, probably, not every community is going to have a Seattle Study Club as great as that one because of Rich and how much work they put into it. But I guarantee you there's a group in pretty much every, I don't know, if you're in Waxahachie, Texas, it might be a tougher sled, but if you're in any kind of metropolitan area, there's going to be some kind of great group, and get a part of, become affiliated with it. Like it will make you better. And just like you said, a lot of times it's just the personal relationship stuff, but even if that's all it is, like that's so fulfilling, and that's such an amazing thing. And I just think all too often, especially, solo practitioners like you and me, close ourselves up in our office and we don't grow. And I think that's a real problem. And so get out there, join a group, present cases, even if they're failures, like it will make you better. It will make them better. It makes everybody better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, Joshua, I'll get this session to an end here. So I really appreciate everything you're doing. If somebody ever wants to get a hold of you or come see you, I know you're just lecturing with the Seattle Study Club. I know you've got a website, joshuaaustindds.com. Are you doing anything else out there that if people want to get a little piece of you or what you're doing, what's going on in your world?
You can hit me up on pretty much any social media, at Joshua Austin DDS, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just search Joshua Austin. You'll find me. You can go to austindentalseminars.com. We're we're relaunching that website soon. It's got stuff up on it now, but we're gonna have more stuff up on it coming up in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, it's I'm easily accessible. You can email me at jaustindds@me.com, or hit me up on any social media platform. I will be there. Be happy to answer anyone's questions or chat with anyone. I think this is an amazing profession that we are in, and I just love learning from other people and chatting with other people, because there's always something that somebody's doing better than me, and finding out about it, I think is what makes this so fulfilling.
Great. Couldn't agree more. And look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm not sure if I'll make it to Symposium this year, but if I do, I'll track you down and buy you a beer. So
let's do it.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing you again. Appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.